Welcome into another edition of the Sun Devil Source Postgame Show. That's Chris Cartman. I'm Ethan Ryder, following ASU's 84-68 win over NAU. Chris, before we even get to the game, Bobby Hurley had some interesting comments in his postgame press conference to open it up. He talked about the 2020-21 season being dysfunction at its finest. What were your thoughts on his comments?
It's stuff that we knew, but it was very random coming, had nothing to do, seemingly, with tonight's game, except that maybe in some way that it did, and in a way that we don't exactly know yet about. But we know that Bobby Hurley felt like things were on a great trajectory prior to the start of the pandemic, right? ASU was playing quite well that February, March going into 2020, the postseason, and then that all got the plug pulled, and then ASU had Romello White transfer. The Remy Martin, Alonzo Verge, Josh Christopher thing never worked, that whole experiment. And it seemed like a lot of things were kind of going on, but behind the scenes with the program, right, Ethan? When they had injuries and other issues, but then Remy Martin ends up transferring to Kansas, and it was just kind of weird. And Bobby Hurley never fully came out and said anything like he did in this game. He did say, we got to get guys who are warriors and want to be with us after the conclusion of that season. But tonight was sort of, it was a little bit odd, actually. But he said that we had nobody in the program in either of the last 2 years that did anything to continue on the trajectory that they had been on prior to that. But he also said that last year's team was a group that battled and fought hard. So that seemed a little bit contradictory to me in some ways. I don't know. I asked a question, a follow-up, what precipitated his comments about this tonight. And he said that's to be determined. So that didn't make sense. Like, how can what led you to say what you said be to be determined? I don't know.
Determined.
Yeah, but basically the gist of it was, I think, that we have to relearn a lot of things now because we're new compared to nobody still around who was here back then when we were really successful 3 years ago, the nature of college basketball these days. And also that those last two teams weren't in a situation where they could have been up 35 points as ASU was tonight before it allowed NAU to creep back to as close as 11 or 12 points. Game was pretty much over, but very interesting. Something that we're going to probably have to follow up on because maybe there could be some issues with some lingering stuff or not. I don't really know.
Yeah, we'll definitely stay tuned to that. And as you said,
he said to be determined.
He did say so. We're gonna have to figure out if it becomes determined or not. If it's to be, we hope it does become determined. Odd. But anything that does come from that,
we're putting the video up. So just sundevilsource.com or check the Devil Sanctuary. Yeah. You can tell us what you think.
Yeah, we give you everything that he said in that press conference was a little strange. You said a little odd, to be determined. We'll keep you up to date on anything that comes from that. But he was very heartfelt in his message or his pre-presser message, I should say. And he also said, as you just said, other teams weren't really able to be up 30 points or however much they were today. So what were your thoughts on the game, just initial takeaways, given they did get out to a big lead and, as you said, kind of let it dwindle towards the end?
Yeah, NAU not nearly as good as Tarleton State. I think we'll see that play out over the next few months. The Lumberjacks missed their first 10 three-pointers, and some of those were open shots, right? So ASU was able, though, still to play much better offensively. It looked better, more cohesively. The passing was crisper. They had a better sense of purpose. They were both successful in going to an open post offense where they had some pick and roll stuff with Warren Washington at the top. Then they also got the ball to him on the inside. They moved the ball quite well around in transition, getting up and down the floor. Frankie Collins looked much more like the type of point guard that had been promised by Bobby Hurley and some of his teammates than the guy that we saw on Monday, who was responsible for 24 shots and only 4 assists and more turnovers than that. Tonight he had 8 assists. At least half of those came in about a 4-minute burst late in the first half, where ASU went on a huge run to take a massive advantage at halftime. I think it was a 27-9 run to end the half, and then ASU scored the first 10 points, I believe, out of halftime, so 37-9 or something like that overall. ASU was up 35 points at one point in time, and the game was like obviously over, and then it got kind of chippy. NAU appeared to be frustrated. There was a 50-50 held ball situation that involved Devon Cambridge, where neither player wanted to let go of the ball. They ended up tumbling to the ground. Then we saw that Duke Brennan was at the scorer's table to check in. He gets called for leaving the bench area, or the area where he was supposed to be, and he gets disqualified. And then also one of ASU's coaches, Jermaine Kimbrough, was ejected for the game, and he was sort of trying to keep everybody from leaving the bench, it seemed like, which was a little bit weird. Then we saw Enoch Boache come in his first minute, and he got into a tussle after a defensive foul, and then it was a double technical situation. Then he had right after that he had a goaltending, and then he had a dunk. It was like he let everybody know that he was getting his first minute out there on the court tonight. But there was like a lot that happened for the game being, and after the game, for the game being a pretty just generic lopsided blowout.
Yeah, from the floor, everything that happened was kind of wild, because, I mean, it happened, you're like, what's happening at first? And then Brennan, as you said, Duke, he was coming in, and then Coach came over and told him to step back, and then they both got ejected. It was kind of weird. But anyways.
Duke Brennan's going to be involved in a lot of stuff, I think.
That kind of feels like something that definitely is going to transpire. It's a game that was a lot different than their first game, and you spoke a little bit broadly about their performance. What specific things do you think allowed them to have a sort of offensive explosion that they had tonight?
Well, I think Tarleton took it to ASU with its game plan and its approach on the defensive end. NAU wasn't able to do that. ASU was pretty much able to do what it wanted schematically. Felt a lot more comfortable, and rhythm was also a thing. There weren't as many dead balls due to fouls, and some ability to have some flow and chemistry and what was going on. I think ASU's players getting the jitters out and kind of understanding what they're trying to do. And then Desmond Cambridge not playing tonight due to tendonitis. I think that sort of tightened the rotation even more than what had been the case on Monday, which perhaps maybe worked for them in kind of a way. It's interesting because we knew coming into this season that ASU had a deeper team, 10, 11 guys, and that fighting for roles might end up leading to some issues that sort of narrowing in on who they need to be playing and why and how, and what combinations of guys and who off the bench and everything. But DJ Horn and Frankie Collins, they got along really well in this game, and Collins did his job as a distributor very differently than against Tarleton, which sagged under everything and forced him to become a jump shooter. And ASU again dominated on the glass and got some transition opportunities, which kind of helped. But when you're doing that, and then you're hitting 3-pointers, and everything was kind of going right for ASU for the Lions stretch of that game, 25 minutes or so.
And you just spoke about Desmond Cambridge, tendonitis. There were a couple other players that had to sit out against Tarleton, a couple more that had to sit out today as well. What do we know about the status of the players that are out injured right now? Right,
so Cambridge, I think that's TBD now. Tendonitis is something that can linger. He obviously played in the opener. And then Jemiah Neal, who's a utility kind of a guard who can play 3 or more positions. He's had a lower body injury, unspecified. Hasn't played the first 2 games. To be determined, I think, for ASU's next game and kind of beyond that. Also, Marcus Bagley got hurt today, going down on a hard fall on a layup, hit his head on the court. It was a little scary there for a few seconds, but he popped up. The trainers were attending to him. He ended up going to the locker room before the halftime. Then he came out and started the second half, had a bandage on his face, hit a 3-pointer. Seemed like he had a lot of competitive fire, kind of like within himself in this game, which that sort of seems like that's probably a good sign for him, because he's had all the injury problems and issues kind of bouncing back, including after falls to the floor. So that was a development. The other thing that's kind of happened that I think is very much worth noting is Frankie Collins, pardon me, Duke Brennan has played ahead of Enoch Boakye, which nobody probably expected that was going to happen, except maybe Duke Brennan and his mother going into this season. Enoch Boakye is the highest rated high school signee at center all time at ASU. He's built like pretty much nobody that we've seen at ASU in recent years. 6'10", 230, 240, whatever he is, but very athletic, runs the floor, has a very high ceiling to his game. But yet, for some reason, Duke Brennan has apparently outplayed him. But I asked Bobby Hurley about it. He said, yeah, he's played better than him in some of our key practices or scrimmages or whatever. And that's what's led to him getting those minutes. Brennan had 3 offensive rebounds in the opener. He just seems like a ball of energy and somebody who's very sort of bouncy going up and down the floor and involved at both ends. And I think that sort of that physical and tenacity coming off the bench is something that Hurley's been happy with. But Boakye, I thought, also provided that. And so that may be something that continues. Hurley did say that Boakye has had a good attitude, and he's been doing fine, practicing well of late. So something that we're going to probably keep monitoring as well. But Warren Washington is clearly their starting center, and they have a 7-footer there who can be an anchor. He's had some foul troubles. Didn't really play particularly well in either one of these games. But what they have depth and redundancy now to where they can bring on different guys in the post in ways that they haven't been able to in most of Hurley seasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were 2 or 3 times that Enoch was talked to by Bobby Hurley in regards to kind of a play he made and maybe something he could do differently. So I think there is a little bit of that there. And then as you said, outplaying him in scrimmages during practice that we haven't been able to see very much of. So as you said, we'll have to continue looking at that. But in terms of this Arizona State team, they've had an opening game against Tarleton State where they didn't look great, come away with the win. That's a very fair point. They looked bad.
Okay.
Come away with the win anyways. Now play against NAU, as you say, is not as good of a team, didn't look as good of a team, but still had a better performance. What do you think these fans and people listening are going to be able to see from Arizona State? What happened in the first game or what happened in the second?
One of the things I always say when scouting prospects, something I've done for obviously a lot of years, is you can't put too much stock in any one game. I've seen plenty of guys shoot the ball really poorly in one game or light it up. And if you were to decide that what you think about somebody's game based upon it, you would come away with a incorrect assessment of what a player is. So you have to watch more than one game. We recorded a podcast after the opener. We were all talking about Frankie Collins being maybe the guy who would have a chance to be an all-conference player on this team. And then, of course, you see DJ Horn have 18 points tonight and look like he's capable very much of making good on the second team preseason all-conference status. So I think that it's very much to be determined. Probably they're not as bad as they were on the offensive end and as sort of challenged in some of the ways, and we're not going to see such lopsidedness in terms of the way that the shots come in the opener. And we're probably not going to see things go quite as smoothly as they did tonight consistently in terms of what they were able to do with getting assisted baskets and converting on a lot of their shot attempts and whatnot in that huge run that they had to end the first half and start the second half as they did tonight. I think the key thing really is, are they going to be able to share the ball, and are they going to be able to play consistently hard and tenacious, be a good defensive team, limit second chance opportunities, and then not take bad shots on the offensive end of the floor, because those have been problems that they've struggled with under Hurley for years now. And if they're able to just be modestly improved in all those areas and maybe even significantly improved in some of them, they have a chance of being a much better basketball team this year.
Yeah, and it is probably important to say it is a very new team with all the transfers and that type of situation. Yeah. Maybe you expect some sort of growing pains, and maybe we're seeing that around college basketball as well, just with that new transfer portal. That's something that we're starting to see. Yeah,
there's a lot of parity in college basketball. USC losing to Florida Gulf Coast, and Oklahoma State lost tonight to what would be considered an inferior team. So there's landmines out there like throughout the schedule and the opportunities to step on and go boom. But ASU has to do a good job with its resume now, because the conference play is always going to be a challenge, and for them to get back to where they want to be, which is competing for postseasons, they can't have too many of those letdowns that result in losses. And there's going to be some probably tougher non-conference opponents coming up in the weeks to follow.
Tougher opponents coming up. 2 games to start the season for ASU. 2 very different games. Still start the season 2-0 after tonight's win over NAU. That's going to be it for this edition of the Sun Devil Source post-game show. Make sure to stay tuned to all of our content reviewing this game and getting ready for Texas Southern over the weekend. So make sure to stay tuned to all of our content on sundevilsource.com. But for now, that's Chris Cartman. I'm Ethan Ryder. We'll see you guys next time.